Parasite from writer-director Bong Joon-ho is a phenomenal film. I think it was well worth some of his Oscars that it won, and I would definitely recommend seeing this if you get the chance. Regardless if you have a certain affinity to foreign language films with subtitles or not, it's still an excellent film. Parasite is an excellent film. It really kind of focuses on a lower class family, the Kims, who basically live in a basement of a multi-rise building in kind of a poor working class market area in a big city in South Korea. And what happens is they're really just struggling for every single dollar. It shows them going along, basically folding pizza boxes, not really folding them all correctly, losing money, and then kind of haggling with it. But you can tell that the whole family, they all are pretty smart people, but they've kind of just, are on the short end of the stick in terms of like the class that they're born into, so to speak. And they really are just kind of having a hard time. The son, who goes by the name Kevin, later on in the film, he's very smart. He has a friend that's in university that he meets up with. The guy gives him a nice little rock that has some kind of possible mythical purpose to it. It's a good luck rock basically. And he talks to him and says, when I'm leaving, you can take my job being an English tutor for this rich family, the Parks. And they'll pay you pretty well. You just got to be good at it. You were one of the smartest people I knew back when we were in the military. You should be in university with me, so on and so forth. So the boy takes the job. He gets there, sees the Park family. They live in this just massive house. Their yard is, phenomenal, perfectly green, manicured yard. And he's just amazed when he walks up and sees it, because it's not something that he's, normally accustomed to being around or in, as he lives kind of in a very city dwelling, while this is a massive house in the middle of the city that has enough space for this fabulous yard. And he goes to the house with the matron, or the maid, who introduces him into the matron of the house. And he's still just in awe of the house, how big it is. The kitchen is massive. The living room, sitting room is massive. All the different rooms are. But he ends up getting the job. As he's leaving, he discovers that the Park's son, who is this budding artist possibly, and he's an art teacher, so he in a sly way recommends his sister, because it's very recommendation based. The matron originally told him, you were recommended by somebody we trust. I just want to observe you and see how good you are as a teacher. So, that recommendation meant something. So he recommends his sister, pretending not to be his sister. And I think she goes by Jessica is the name that they give her in this one, as being this art teacher. Of course, his sister, she's a talented artist in her own right, because she did some forging of some documents for him to make it look like he was in school already to present to the Parks originally. And what happens is he recommends his sister, and then they see an opportunity to possibly, after his sister gets a job, to position his father to be able to become the driver. So the sister does a little incident where she drops her panties in the car, hides them. Mr. Park finds them, fires his driver surreptitiously. He doesn't say what it's actually for. And then, the daughter, or Jessica, she had recommended to the mother, I believe, someone she knew that used to drive. So the father ends up getting the job, and at that point, the only other character who's also part of the lower class is the maid, who basically was the maid of the people that owned the house before the Parks. Now she's the maid of the Parks, and they end up scheming to get her job as well for the mother of the Kim family. So they end up doing that and getting rid of it, and they kind of have a little event where they're taking care of the Parks kids, but then they go off to go camping. So what happens is the Kim family get there and they kind of revel in the good fortune that they're having at this time. They all got jobs, they're all making good money, and they're basically just eating the Parks food while the Parks on this camping trip. And it's a very well shot film. A lot of shots of the busy, bustling city, multiple layers of the composition, and kind of some small critiques or takes on the upper and lower classes, and specifically like the Parks, and kind of how they're just flighty or partially drunks, and just kind of doesn't really understand or relate to the lower class. How the lower class is very hardworking and constantly having to fight to survive and really do whatever they can to be able to get along. So they're in the house celebrating when all of a sudden this maid shows back up. She shows up, and that's when the film kind of takes a little bit of a darker turn, because you end up finding out that the maid has had her own husband there living in a fallout shelter under the house. So some antics ensue where the maid and her husband gets locked back down in the shelter. The Parks come home, so the Kims have to clean up as much as they can and hide real fast. The Parks then have this instance where it's raining really hard, and the kid goes out and sets in his teepee to sleep. And then the Mr. Park, you can see he's kind of believes that everything he possesses is his, because there's a couple moments where, he starts off and him and his wife are laying on the couch and they start trying to get romantic or sexual with it, and you can see she's very hesitant, and it's like, no, the kid's out there, let's not do it. But he really forces the issue. Like, he's someone who has had everything given to him in his life and clearly believes that he's within his right, or anything that is in his realm is possessed by him. So he does eventually force himself on his wife before she finally relents and appears to be enjoying the interaction or engagement. They fall asleep. The Kims end up leaving. They go back to their house at now, because they're having this massive rainstorm and flood. It's completely flooded out, and it's just awful. And there's a couple moments there where, while they're hiding, while the Parks are trying to get jiggy with it, make a couple comments about the smell that Mr. Kim has. It's like the smell, it doesn't go away. He's a nice man, he never crosses the line, but there's that smell crosses the line, and it's kind of a a little prelude or hint towards kind of his problem with like lower class people, saying that they just stink or they have a certain smell. They're not as cleanly or as hygienic as we are. Kind of that white ivory tower kind of setting, and it works really well in terms of how they set this up, because once they get there, their house is all flooded out. They go to like a refugee shelter. The Parks then, of course, call this massive party the next day. They show back up at the party with whatever clothes that they could salvage. They're not really terribly happy to be there. Mr. Park then tries to force the dad, Mr. Kim, to dress up like an Indian and run around and do this. And then he's like, I don't really want to do it, but he scolds him, and he was like, no, you're going to do it. This is part of your job. You're being paid extra for this. And then, they go out and start doing this, when all of a sudden, from the bottom, breaks up the husband of the former maid. And they, because of what happened before, they've gone a little crazy. Some fights break out. A couple people end up getting stabbed, which you're not really suspecting this movie to kind of go down that darker angle. But once it does, it kind of takes everything off the table. And then there's another moment where Mr. Park kind of looks and covers his mouth at the lower class former housekeeper's husband, and at that point, then Mr. Kim ends up just losing his mind and just taking one to Mr. Park there before running off. And film ends with the Kim family kind of back in the same position that they started in. The Parks have since moved on. The big massive house is sold to another family, and then you find out that the son discovers that his pops is actually hiding out in the basement of the house now. He's wanted by the police. He's still there, and the son makes a pledge, in a letter that he hasn't sent, that he's gonna save his father. He's gonna make enough money to be able to finally afford that house and all these good things, because it's something that kind of came back started in the very beginning of the film, in which they were talking about what you aspire to, what you feel you want or need to have in life, versus what you have in the position you're in, and how you can go from basically having to work every day for just a scrap of food to eat, to being able to just work a little bit and have enough money to buy a massive house, a hot wife, younger wife that can just get drunk and do whatever she wants. And it's a very excellent film. I would highly recommend it. It is in Korean and does have subtitles, but you don't really think about that throughout the film, because it is so well shot in terms of how they move the camera through the image, or move the camera through the film, and position it to where you can kind of get in the heads of the different characters and see the various stages of life, or kind of the class levels or social classes over there, and how they interact and have this kind of tension between them before it finally bowls over. And just something as an offhand remark or comment leads to this ultimate sacrifice by one or ultimate deed or action or misdeed by another, and causes someone to lose their life in the end that you weren't really expecting it. But it is a very good film, highly worthy of a couple of its Oscars, and I would definitely recommend if you got the time to go watch it. It's about 2 hours and 10-ish minutes or so it's not terribly long, but it goes pretty fast. And when it picks up at the end of the second act, you are not really expecting it, and it's like, wow, 140 minutes in, and all of a sudden everything kind of goes to shit, and it's crazy, and it works out very well. Again, I would highly recommend this film. Other than that, thank you. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and have a good day.